How's it going, everybody? Welcome to Perfect Reload Weekly, where we take a look back at the week in video game news. My name is Steve, and I'm joined, as always, by Christian. Christian, how you doing this week, man? You had last week off.
I watched your garbage show last week with your friend from The Cure. Glad you know how to properly set up a microphone, stupid.
Yeah, thanks, man. Glad you're always throwing your support our way. Last week, a little bit different format. My buddy Davis came over. We watched the Microsoft Game Showcase, and then right after filmed this show. And I apologize for the audio issues. I had put some noise suppression on his microphone because it's not like an omnidirectional microphone. It's going to pick up everything in the room. And somehow that ended up just like really throwing everything off. I mean, it was terrible because that microphone shouldn't sound that bad because it's the microphone I used before I got this one, and it was perfectly fine. There was something in there. I did absolutely best I could in Premiere afterwards to try and separate the two because his microphone was bleeding into mine, I was bleeding into his, and it was just not great. So he's definitely interested in doing the show again. What we might unfortunately have to do is maybe not do it in person, and he would just have to stay at his home, and that way we can get a little bit better audio mix going for that stuff. But it was a fun time. It was nice having somebody else in the room, somebody else to bounce back on, because Moron here is not super, interested in being helpful. I had a good time doing that. We obviously, big week in video games, a lot of game announcements. And of course, in the news section, we'll get into and all that. Kind of went through everything that got announced for the stuff that I watched and picked out my favorites. And we'll talk a little bit about that. But this week, I kind of needed a week off from video games, if you will. So I didn't play much this week, but I did get around to messing around with a few things. And we'll start off with the Final Fantasy the Final Fantasy XVI demo, which I streamed on the channel. So if you want to see some gameplay of that, I only played about an hour's worth of it. When I stream, for the most part, I'm not trying to do these marathon streams, just to kind of give you an idea of an average video game player playing the game. I could just pre-record the footage and toss it up on the channel, which would in many ways maybe make a little bit more sense. But I like doing it as a live stream. That way, just in case anybody wants to pop in and ask any questions, hey, we can answer those questions as we're playing the game. So, I enjoy being able to do it that way. But, Christian, I know you were kind of interested in Final Fantasy. Do you have any thoughts on what you saw of the game?
A bunch of whiny British pretty boys with magical hands is basically my whole 1996, you know what I mean?
I don't know and do not want to know what you mean, no. But yeah, the game is very British. It is very, I don't mean that in a derogatory term. It's just, it is in that medieval, setting that's very similar to what you would see in movies and television shows that take place in ancient England and the like. I talked about it on the stream that I want to say I saw somewhere that they were influenced by Game of Thrones, and I don't know if that was a joke or if that was serious. I probably should have taken the time to look that up, but if they weren't, then there's a lot of coincidences in the game, because there is, through the kind of the prologue tutorial section that you play through in the demo, a lot of odd coincidences or parallels to the beginning of Game of Thrones. The child that the father has a soft spot for that wants to be a warrior that the mother doesn't like, very Jon Snow-ish. You see the dog getting into things that maybe it shouldn't have as my dog starts squeaking a toy. Right on cue, buddy. But you see the dog kind of getting in the way, just like the direwolves did in the beginning of season 1 of Game of Thrones. The small child that is supposed to, be the future of this kingdom, much like Bran is in Game of Thrones. So yeah, there's a few too many kind of on the nose moments for me to say that that they weren't influenced in some way by Game of Thrones, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I said it on the stream. Like, people kind of forget how good at one point Game of Thrones was, and they also kind of forget how big of a pop cultural phenomenon it was. It brought people like me, who traditionally don't like fantasy, into watching a show that has many fantastical elements. There's kind of light magic in Game of Thrones. There's dragons and whatnot. But the characters and the writing and everything were just so good that it was hard not to enjoy the show, despite maybe it not being a genre that you would typically find yourself enjoying. The way I looked at it was just a serious political drama with some humor. There's definitely a lot of funny parts to Game of Thrones that just so happened to be wrapped up in this medieval-ish magical world. This is kind of the way I ultimately landed on Game of Thrones. And I feel like that's kind of what this is with Final Fantasy. Although I will say, a lot of people I've seen online, there are a lot of threads that I was reading once the demo came out of people saying, like, hey, actually having a Final Fantasy game that takes place in a traditional fantasy setting is kind of refreshing. And so people seem to definitely be really excited about that. I enjoyed what I played of the demo. I don't know if I'm going to pick up the game. It comes out this week. I'm still really in the middle of playing a couple other things, and I don't know if I can add a third game on top of that, especially one that's going to be lengthy. So now that we have a better roadmap of what the rest of this year looks like, thanks to all the game announcements, there are definitely some dead areas in the year, and maybe slotting Final Fantasy in there would be the best choice instead of having nothing to play. Hey, pick up a game that's a month, 2 months old, whatever, and get through it. My biggest complaint with the demo, and granted it was it's a demo, yes, but it is legitimately just like the opening of the game, right? Like, this is at retail what you would pick up when you buy the game and bring it home to play. A little button mashy. There were, and granted, this is my fault, there were a couple of times where I forgot that I had a few attacks, but I felt like there was a real lack of attack variety. And basing that off of my experience with Final Fantasy VII Remake, which I played earlier this year, I felt like even at the beginning of the game, you had more options at your disposal. You were able to control your party members. I did not see that as an option in this. Granted, the combat system is a little bit different. This is very... I guess they're going with... Devil May Cry-ish influences. I believe there was maybe some crossover with people that worked on Devil May Cry. They're working on this. But it is very button mashy. It feels almost like a beat 'em up in ways. And it's not a bad thing, but when you only have one or two attacks and you're not dealing very much damage, and at the beginning of the game when the combat finally opens up, you've got these two boss characters back to back, it's like, man, I really am just kind of sitting here pressing square over and over again for the past 20 minutes, and it gets a little tiresome. It's hard to judge the game right now because you don't have the full game in front of you, but if it really is going to kind of break down to here are these very lengthy cutscenes and then combat where you're just smashing on buttons, is that going to really carry you through? For some people, yes, absolutely. Unequivocally, they are going to be totally fine with that. But I guess the question for me is, am I going to be okay with that? Do I need a little bit more along the way? Do I need the combat to be a little bit more varied? Now, of course, eventually you're going to get more attacks. I have to imagine at some point you're controlling your party members. I just feel like that would be weird not to in a Final Fantasy game. But I think that it's not necessarily the best, first impression when you're playing through the game. But I feel like I am very much in the minority with that, because everything that I've seen online so far with people playing this demo is that they are thrilled with what they experienced in the demo. So, maybe I just need to be a little bit more open-minded and kind of get it into my brain that, like, hey, things will probably open up as I continue to play this game. But if you want to check out the footage, like I said, there's the first hour or so of the demo out. Demo is obviously still available to download on PS5. Game comes out this week. If you're on the fence, there's really no reason not to download the demo, especially because a very smart move by Square Enix, all the progress that you make in the demo is just going to carry over. So when you buy that game this week, you're not starting from the beginning again. You're just picking up where you left off on the demo. That is a really, really nice touch. And I wish more games had demos, and the ones that do have demos, if they're a story-based game, I wish they would do stuff like this. That was one of the big reasons why I didn't play too much of the Diablo IV beta, because I knew all that progress was going to go away, and I was just going to have to do it all over again. So I really limited what I did in that beta, as I didn't want to just then, not long after, replay a bunch of stuff over and over again. So I guess that'll, segue into the other game I played this week, though granted not as much as I would have liked to, but I did play more Diablo IV, a little bit short burst throughout the week. Ran into my first big technical issues and hiccups. I had a problem where I booted into the game. I was dumped into the game world, not where I left off. I was back at the first city you visit, which I thought was a little strange. And then as I was moving around the world, my character was kind of rubber banding all over the place. There would be moments where the directional inputs I was putting in through my controller were not translating into the game. 30 seconds later, now I would be on the other side of the screen. And then I would try to, wrangle my character back, and then I would be back on the other side of the screen. There are times where my character disappeared from the screen and would appear somewhere else, seemingly at random on the screen. And it got to the point where I was like, you know what? I don't think this game is playable right now, which sucked, because it was one of the few times where I actually had some spare time this week that I wanted to sit down and say, told myself, like, I'm going to sit down and play a video game tonight. And the game just wasn't working. So that was definitely a shame. But I did eventually, the next day, I was able to play a little bit of it, and it was back to normal, didn't run into those issues again. For being, this always online experience, you're going to have some issues time to time with that. I know that they did some server maintenance, granted that server maintenance was while I'm asleep. It was like 3 a.m. my time or something like that. So that doesn't, that's not going to bother me in any way. But, there's going to be times where the servers are down. There are going to be times where their servers aren't running right, and you're going to run into issues like I ran into. That stuff is going to happen. And then on the other side of that, with it being always online and it being this kind of persistent world, I have not run into too much. I would think that when a world event triggers, there would be other people kind of racing towards it. But with the exception of one world event so far, I have done all of them by myself. I have not run into anybody else. I will occasionally run into other players out in the world. Obviously, when you're in a main town, you will see a bunch populated throughout. But it's been pretty slim pickings in terms of having someone to do a world event with you. There was also a situation where I was not thrilled, where I was trying to go from point A to point B to finish a quest, and a world event populated exactly where I was, and died. I was not ready to handle that. I was, low on, I was low on health potions at that time. So I just completed a dungeon. I hadn't collected any because I hadn't found any enemies to fight along my way to gather more, and so I died. And I was like, well, that sucks. I thought that was kind of poor timing. I don't know how they trigger those world events. I don't know if it simply triggered because I was in the area where it would trigger, and they're like, oh, well, this player is there. I guess they would want to go and do this. So that was a little disappointing. I also don't like the fact that when you finish a very lengthy dungeon, and you might be low on health potions. At the point right now, I can carry 4. I haven't found a way to be able to carry more yet, but I can carry 4. And I finished this very lengthy dungeon. I had none left, and I exit the dungeon after completing it, and right outside the door, right when I spawn back into the world, I am completely surrounded by enemies that are already attacking me. And it's like, man, sometimes you just need a second to breathe in this game. And I mentioned it, I think it was last week, because I think last week was the first week I talked about the games. I got the game, just a few days before we filmed. You can't pause the game, really. You can bring up the menus, but you can't pause the game as it's always online. Well, I had finished beating a bunch of enemies, and I had brought up my menu to look at my loot, and next thing you know, I was getting attacked by enemies because they had spawned at my location because I don't know if it was because I was standing still too long or whatever it was, but that was seriously annoying. But, those gripes ultimately are fairly minor, in the grand scheme of things. They are fairly minor. I think the game is tremendous so far. I'm really, really enjoying it. I can't say that I'm enjoying it more than Diablo 3 yet, because I haven't played as much of 4 as I have of 3, obviously, with 3 being out, for so many years. That lack of combat roll, man, I'm never going to get used to that. I hate the fact that it's not in there. I get that they give you a dash. It's on a 5-second cooldown. I don't like it. I liked having that mobility of that combat roll. I really, really enjoyed the way it made Diablo play. It made an already great game a little bit better. So for them to go a step backwards, with the next iteration of the franchise, I think is a little, it's disappointing. Definitely disappointing, and it's a knock against the game, I would say, for certain. But that being said, I am really enjoying it. A lot of the dungeons are very samey feeling. There's not a lot of color to this game. Everything is very bleak and dark. I have already encountered a couple of repeat areas where it's different quests, or it's the same type of quest, but in different parts of the world map. And the area I went into was identical to a previous one. I was like, man, already? Just a few hours in this game, we're already reusing assets? Like, that was a little... I was like, that kind of sucks. But... that being said, I know I sound very down on the game. I am not. It is one of my favorite things I have played this year. It's going to be in contention for Game of the Year for sure. At the end of the year, I would have to imagine. I am really, really enjoying it. It's another one of those games where maybe you're on the fence like I am. Watch some footage, watch some people actually playing the game, and I think it's more to it than some of the negativity that was going out about it being always online, if that is one of your issues with the game. But it was for me. That was the biggest one for me. But I have largely avoided all of that stuff, and not necessarily because of choice. It seems like it has avoided me as well. But a very, very, very fun game. Put a little bit more time into Street Fighter 6 actually this morning, just kind of making my way through World Tour mode and playing more with that. I have a wider variety of attacks now, and it's a really fun mode. I think I mentioned it before. I'm just putting it on mute, listening to my podcast, listening to or watching a show on my phone or whatever while I play. It is ultimately kind of mindless, but I am really enjoying it. But that's going to kind of wrap up what I played this week, and we'll be back in just a moment with the news. All right, we are back with the news. And the news this week obviously going to be a little weird because we covered so much of it as it was happening with all the game showcases that happened over the past week. But one of the big things that I didn't touch upon already was the Starfield Direct, which happened right after the Microsoft Game Showcase. I ultimately decided not to film a reaction to that for a couple of reasons. One, it's only one game, and I figured I could just give my thoughts on this show. And the other one was, Davis was over here filming with me. We weren't going to sit through the Microsoft thing, then the Starfield thing, then have to film this show. That was just going to be too much to get done all in one day. So I figured I just watch the Starfield Direct on my own time and then discuss it with you fine folks on this program. And watch it on my own time, I did. And what I mean by that is I have watched that thing 5 times now. Granted, I watched it once, just the vanilla version of it, and then I have since watched it with, people that I follow on YouTube and whatnot reacting to it, to see if maybe they had some other context that they could provide. And then I also watched the IGN video that they did with a sit-down interview with Todd Howard, where they actually asked some questions that I was surprised some of the stuff he did answer, because it wasn't covered in the Starfield Direct. So yeah, man, there's a lot to get into with this game. It's way more than I thought it was going to be. I think everybody figured the game was going to be big because they make big games, right? The Fallout games are not short games. The Elder Scrolls games are not short games. So I think everybody was kind of on the same page with this is going to be a lengthy experience. But I don't think anybody was quite prepared for how much is actually in this game, and how much they are attempting to do. Now, if you had asked me before 2020, let's say that this was all happening in 2019, I would be rabidly chomping at the bit, fully expecting that they are going to deliver on everything that they showed. But we live in a different time now. We've had a lot of disappointing game releases since then, and I know I always bring it up, but it really is, we are in a post-cyberpunk landscape here, which I think is why we see so many delays of bigger games now, is because nobody wants to be the next Cyberpunk. If you look at the footage that we saw last year of Starfield versus what we saw this year, night and day for the most part. Everything looks nicer. Animations look better. Graphics look better. Lighting looks better. Their sense of what this game is seems tighter in a way. I think that it really shows, people, you see people online a lot say like, well, how much can really be accomplished if a game is delayed 6 months, if a game is delayed a year, whatever it may be. And this game is ultimately, it's been delayed a couple of times now, but the most recent one has essentially been delayed a year, just shy of a year and a half. They initially said that they were going to go till before June. We ultimately got a September release date. And it seems like they got a lot done in that time. I honestly don't know where to start. For many people, this is going to be their dream outer space game. It's not quite mine. For me, I would want something, more like a Mass Effect, a Star Trek, where you have that tight-knit crew and it's a little bit more linear, rather than a big open world. Not to say that, I think the open world aspect is bad. It's just, for my personal taste, my personal, dream outer space game, that would be what it is. But what they showed with the Starfield Direct has me incredibly excited. Spider-Man is still my most anticipated game because, hey, it's the sequel to one of my all-time favorite games. How could it not be? But Starfield is definitely the most excited I've been about a new, fresh IP since Cyberpunk. It's got the potential, if they can hit everything, and there's no way they're going to. Not everything that we saw is going to be what we think it is as it stands right now. None of us haven't played the game. But if they hit 75% of what they touched upon and it all works as intended, then I think it's an incredible achievement in video games. I think that this game has the potential to be one of the greatest games of the modern era, let's say of the past 20 years, if they can pull it off. And I don't mean that they have to pull it off 100%. No game ever does that. That's not possible. Realistically looking at something, but I think that there is the ability here to do enough that it really does pull away and separate itself from everything else around it. And I am so excited to see what ends up happening with it. The fact that you can board ships, there's piracy in the game, weapon customization, all the traits and various things that pop up along the way, bounty hunter stuff, all these different detailed populated worlds. There doesn't seem like there's going to be a shortage of things to do. And one of the things that got brought up a lot was, they don't expect the large majority of people are going to finish the story in the game because they'll just end up doing something else in the world. And that's what I did with Skyrim. I stopped playing the actual mainline story in that game halfway through my time with it. And then after that, I just went off and did other things. I did the Dark Brotherhood, and I did just random quests and found caves to wander around in and all that stuff. And I think with Starfield, I do want to see what their story is. From what I can gather, it appears that it's going to be a first contact story, that you're out there looking for alien life. And either the game is going to have a twist in the middle where you find aliens, or maybe that's the end of the main storyline where, hey, we finally found aliens. I think there are going to be alien races in there somewhere. We'll just have to wait and see if it's going to be in the middle of the game or at the end of the game, or however they choose to do it. We did see alien creatures, non-humanoid creatures for you to fight against on different planets. But other than that, you were up against seemingly all human type characters. It didn't seem to be anybody that was a different species than human that you were fighting against. But I'm curious to see. I think that there's a lot, as much as they showed of this game, I think there's a lot more that we didn't see when it comes to the story, because they really didn't touch on the story all that much. There is something to do with like ancient alien artifacts, which, man, that is a tired trope, but hey, that's the story they're dealing with, or that's the story that they've chosen to go with, and that's fine with me. I'm sure they'll pull something together with it, and but then again, I don't know. I didn't finish the main story in Skyrim. I don't know if I would have been disappointed with it, and I don't like the Fallout games, so I certainly have never finished any of their stories, and I don't know a lot of people that have, so I don't really have people that I can ask to say like, hey, were you disappointed with the Bethesda main story, or was it all the side stuff and all the personality and all of the, let's say the story is the cake, the icing, was the icing better than the cake, that kind of thing. And sometimes that's okay, sometimes it's perfectly fine. But when I look at like big RPGs and big epic games like this, that I've played in the past, I think the easiest parallel would be Mass Effect. Is, yes, I did enjoy the main story, probably more so than I enjoyed a lot of the side stuff, although some of the side stuff in Mass Effect is incredibly, incredibly good. And there are certainly parts of the main story that are not as good as some of the side stuff that you go off and do. But overall, I would say that they crafted a fairly good story through the 3 games. And maybe with Starfield, they are going to put a little bit more emphasis on their main story to get people to get through it. Because I certainly don't think it's going to be one of those things where you finish the main story and then that's it. You're certainly going to be able to go out and explore and do all that stuff. There's no way they're going to cut you off from doing that. That's not how they work. That's not how a big open game works, right? Like that's just not going to happen. You're going to be able to accomplish everything that you want to accomplish in that game, regardless of if you finish that main story or not. Possibly they put some gating mechanics in there to stop you from doing certain stuff, to incentivize you to play further into the story. Maybe that's possible. Maybe you need to meet certain people or have certain events transpire through the main story and able to open up further different areas of the game. It all remains to be seen, but I am excited for it. It's on Game Pass, so it's going to be a really widely played game. It's definitely going to be the talk of the video game world when it comes out. And then kind of the big, I guess, not bombshell, but the big thing that I was surprised about, because I thought it was a little weird that the game was coming out on a Wednesday. I thought that was a little weird, to be honest. And then they announced like, hey, if you buy the more expensive version, you're going to get it the previous Friday. And that's a smart move on their end, because here in America, that's Labor Day weekend. So you're going to be able to get that game after work on Friday, or if you take the day off, you're going to have it on Friday, you're going to have Saturday and Sunday to play it, and then most people have Monday off. So now you've got 3 to 4 days to just plow into Starfield. So that's kind of a smart move on their end. And for people that have Game Pass, or going to pick it up on Game Pass like myself. Well, how are you supposed to do that if you're not buying the game you're getting on Game Pass? Well, they kind of solve that problem by just taking that early access and all of the stuff that comes with like the premium edition of the game and just selling it for $30. So you could still have it on Game Pass, pay your $30, get the game early, get all the DLC that comes with it and whatnot. So that'll be the route that I take, because I'm definitely going to play this game as soon as I possibly can. And I imagine we'll be streaming it when it comes out. But yeah, I could sit here and talk and ramble on and repeat myself and trip over my words for an hour about Starfield. If you, for whatever reason, didn't see the Starfield Direct, I really think that you should. Even if you think that it's maybe not your type of game, unless you definitively know that I have no interest in sci-fi, I have no interest in outer space, I have no interest in an open world RPG, then I think you should definitely check it out, because whether you like this game or you don't, this game is going to be huge, and it is, if they pull it off, it's not just that the game is going to be popular in a mainstream sense, it's going to be an incredibly influential game, and it's going to be a game that kind of pushes video games forward a little bit. Now, I'm not trying to say, they went out and said like, oh, this is the most important RPG of all time. That's not what I'm saying here, but I do think that this game is important if they pull it off. It is going to kind of show you that, like, hey, we are kind of entering that next step of video games. We are, kind of getting pushed further into what the medium can do. And this is going to be a really good example of it if they can pull it off. And that's the big if. But let's move on to what my favorite stuff was from all the showcases that I watched. Now, granted, I did not get a chance to watch everything. I didn't get a chance to watch the Devolver conference or the PC gaming show. I watched the Sony showcase, Summer Game Fest, Xbox Game Showcase, and the Ubisoft Forward. So these are going to be from what we watched together. But before I get into what I enjoyed, Christian, did you have anything that kind of sprang in your mind that you thought was pretty cool?
Well, I would have said Starfield was my favorite thing, because now I could finally live out my erotic space cowboy fantasies. But I think I'm going to go with Payday 3, simply because I want to party up with you and make everything 100 times harder by pretending I can't hear your instructions.
Awesome. That's great. Yeah. Cool, man. Yeah, I was talking about it. It's like, I gotta find people to play Payday 3 with, because I am very much looking forward to that. We'll get it right out of the way. Obviously, one of the things I was most excited about was Starfield. I just talked about it, so we need to get into that. Star Wars Outlaws. We saw a small taste of it at the Xbox Game Showcase, which I was actually surprised to see, because the Ubisoft event was the following day. But, hey, they showed it at the Xbox conference. It was a big get for Xbox to have in their show. And then the next day, we got to see the gameplay. I thought it looked solid, obviously a little on the rough side. I don't think that game is going to be released within the next 8 months or so. I don't think that's going to be a first quarter 2023 game. I think that's probably going to be holiday next year, and they'll probably use that time wisely to build upon what we saw already, which looked very nice. It was a very nice looking game. I just hope that they have the creative license to have a game called Star Wars Outlaws and actually play it like an outlaw. I want to be able to be a bad guy. I want to be able to be a good guy. I want to be able to be in between. I want to be able to have equal interactions with the bad and the good, and it'd be nice to be able to have choices to like screw people over and stuff like that. I don't know if they're going to go that far with it, but wishful thinking. But what I saw, I thought looked pretty nice. It's nice to get away from the lightsaber combat and have a third person shooter essentially. I know that there are some worry going around, and obviously this is unfounded rumor at this point, but people saying like, oh, halfway through the game or at the end of the game, you'll find out that your character all along was Force sensitive and you are a Jedi. I really, really hope they don't go that route, because that would just be, I'd be banging my head into a wall after that. But they got a lot to live up to with how good Jedi Survivor and Jedi Fallen Order were. But I think that they could probably pull it off. Ubisoft seems to really be putting a lot of time and effort into this game. They're treating it like a big deal, with their other game, big franchises kind of taking a step back right now. Assassin's Creed is going back to basics with Mirage, and Mirage is a smaller title. They don't have the next proper Division sequel coming out. this is kind of their marquee thing right now is Star Wars Outlaws. And it's going to be the first major Star Wars game not made by EA since that agreement came into being once they started kind of re-kicking up Star Wars with the last trilogy of movies and all the TV shows we've had. Star Wars is, the interest in Star Wars it's obviously it's down a little bit since the movies came out. Anytime the actual theatrical releases are in, hype rises. But Star Wars, right now is still very hot. It is still a very hot property. You're coming off of Andor, which was really well received. Obi-Wan, which was well received. The last season of Mandalorian was very good. They've announced future movies now that people are kind of excited about to see what they do. This is a huge opportunity for Ubisoft to kind of re-cement themselves as a major player in, big games. So I'm looking forward to seeing what they're doing. Spider-Man 2, I've already talked enough about this game. It is my most anticipated game. Cannot wait. I was glad to see the big gameplay, section of it, even though it was very slice of the pie of the game and it was very on rails, sort of set piece kind of thing. I'm okay with that. We kind of know what that game is going to play like. Obviously, there'll be newer abilities and whatnot. I thought Miles and I would assume Peter Parker would have this as well, but to make your own kind of walkways in the air with your webs really opens up combat in that game. So I'm very much looking forward to it. One of the big surprises, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. This is not the remake of Prince of Persia that we had been hearing about. This instead brings it back kind of to its roots, although with a very modern twist. It's a side-scrolling game. I guess I would say it's maybe a little bit like Ori in a way. Lots of combat abilities. It's got a really nice art style to it. Looks pretty fast-paced, looks pretty fluid from what you can see. The biggest surprise with it was how polished it looked when I saw the initial trailer, and then to see it's not coming out until January, I was actually kind of surprised, but I think that might be a smart thing. I think that if they did try to put that out this year, it'd get a little bit lost in the shuffle with how many big games are coming out towards the tail end of the summer and the beginning of fall. September and October are very, very flooded. We really didn't get much for November and December, just a couple of things. Maybe they could have stuck it in there at the end of the year, but then you kind of bury your game a little bit, At the end of the year, a lot of people are taking that time to finish what they didn't play earlier in the year, to kind of wrap up their own year in a way for video game playing. You put it out at the beginning of next year, it's a fresh start, They have the opportunity to be the first kind of big talked about game of the year next year, and I think that's kind of a smart thing for them to do. Sticking with the Ubisoft theme, Assassin's Creed Mirage, talked about it a little bit already, but yeah, it's a step backwards, not in a bad way, but a step backwards in Assassin's Creed in the fact that it's going to play much more similar to the original Assassin's Creed games and not necessarily the open world vomit modern Assassin's Creed games like Origins and Odyssey and Valhalla. What I saw, I was really interested in. It looked a little rough around the edges. This game was initially supposed to be DLC for Valhalla. I've heard that it's using some reused assets from previous Assassin's Creed games, so maybe it's not the most high quality of experiences, but as long as it plays well, I don't care about all that. It seemed you saw a couple of new abilities that the character had, and I want to see more of it. I want to get that confirmation that this is going to be a smaller scale experience with a lower price tag. The rumor going around was that this was going to be like $40 to $50. I'm curious if this is going to be, I assume with Ubisoft it will be, but after hearing that Alan Wake won't be at retail, it's digital only, I wonder if this is going to be digital only, and to kind of really hammer home that this is like a taste of what's to come, the Assassin's Creed, because they still have, in the works, another big full mainline, next gen of Assassin's Creed experience on the way. Avowed. I was both excited and disappointed that we saw Avowed. Excited because, it's Obsidian, a studio that I have enjoyed their output as of late. It's kind of their take on Skyrim, though they have since kind of not necessarily walked back that statement, but said that, yes, this is our take on Skyrim, but we've decided to go in a little bit different direction with it to really make it our own. There's guns. It's not all fantasy, magical, sword and shield kind of stuff. Still in that traditional fantasy realm look, though, but I think it looks pretty nice. And, I'm excited to play it because I'm excited to play pretty much anything that Obsidian is doing lately. Disappointed, though, because we didn't hear about the Outer Worlds 2, which we did last year, which leads me to believe that maybe that's been put on the back burner to get Avowed out first. I don't know if that's the case. But, you know, if Avowed comes out next year and then we get Outer Worlds 2 in 2025, you know, it's better than Outer Worlds 2 never coming out. I know I am kind of in the minority of people that really enjoyed the Outer Worlds, but I did. I thought it was a very nice, crisp, tight, condensed gameplay experience made by people that kind of know what to do with that first-person RPG style of game. Next up, Payday 3. I loved Payday 2. I was super into Payday 2 at one point in time, playing it every night. I don't know if I'll be able to do that again with Payday 3, but it looks like my buddy Davis is committed to at least checking it out a little bit with me, so I'm sure I'll be playing with that. I'm also kind of surprised it's coming out on Game Pass. That's kind of a big get for Game Pass. You know, it's a series that is very popular. There's still plenty of people playing Payday 2. And be able to get the next iteration on Game Pass, to have a very fun multiplayer game that doesn't have a financial commitment to it. You can probably easier to get people to play it when they don't have to put down a lot of money to play it. They're not paying the price of a full price game. So we didn't see much of it. You know, we got the trailer, but we didn't see much. But that developer has traditionally done pretty well at showing off their game. You know, I'm sure they'll have some informational YouTube videos along the way leading up to the release of the game. And I'm excited to see what they do with it. Like a Dragon, Infinite Wealth. A very funny trailer. Kiryu waking up naked on the beach. We didn't really see what the game was. It does seem like it is taking place in America. Looks like it's taking place in Hawaii, although I think the game is split. I think you're probably going to have one character in Japan, one character in Hawaii, and we'll see how they intertwine. They are continuing along with the Like a Dragon series, that this is now a full-blown turn-based RPG. They're not going back to that traditional Yakuza style. If you want that, they did announce a Yakuza or Like a Dragon spinoff, Man Who Erased His Name, which will have that, Yakuza 0 through 6 combat style, similar to like with the Judgment games and all that. But I'm fully on board ever since, I liked the Yakuza games as they were, but the turn-based strategy, or turn-based RPG element that they added with the last Like a Dragon really, kind of sealed the deal for me. And, I'm invested in the series now. City Skylines 2, I talked about it on the stream, but I always wanted to get into City Skylines 1. At the time, for whatever reason, the computer I had wouldn't run it. Since then, obviously, I've upgraded the computer a few times. I'm sure it'll more than handle it, but there's so much DLC out, so many years of updates and all that stuff that it's a little bit overwhelming to get into. So just waiting for the sequel. I am really looking forward to. I think they said it is a Game Pass game, which doesn't surprise me because Paradox's kind of last big title, Crusader Kings 3, was also Game Pass at launch. So I'm excited to see that they're kind of keeping up that tradition. I've been itching to play a traditional city builder like this, like a Sim City. I've kind of had some offshoots this year. I've been playing a lot of city builders this year, but not in the way like this, like a modern, living, working actual city, like a metropolis kind of thing. So I am very much looking forward to that. Star Trek Infinite, another Paradox game. So there were a lot of people kind of wondering exactly what this was because they showed it off very, very briefly with just a CG trailer at Summer Game Fest. And the big question was, is this just going to be like the Stellaris mod? There's a total conversion mod for Stellaris that turns it into a Star Trek game. And yeah, it is. I mean, it legitimately looks like they have kind of just officially made that mod for Stellaris. They've even come out and said, like, yeah, this game is built on Stellaris. So it really, if you've already played Stellaris, then this is it. I mean, there's not a lot different with it. It's just going to have that Star Trek layer on top of it. I didn't play a ton of Stellaris, so I'm not burned out on it. So I'm okay with that, But it is a little shame that maybe it's going to maybe feel a little dated. I'm sure there are things with Stellaris that modern eyes would have chosen to do different things, and maybe they do make some tweaks to it. But I am curious to jump into it. No release date for it. It sounded like this year, but their website didn't have a year on it, so I'm not quite sure. And then to round out the rest of things, Mortal Kombat 1. This is kind of the year of the fighting games, right? Street Fighter 6 has been fantastic this year. Tekken, which was not around for any of this. Kind of one of the big glaring omissions. I would say the biggest missing things from last week were Tekken, Gears of War, and Outer Worlds 2, at least for me. And so, yeah, no Tekken. They just haven't said any different about their plans to release this year. But I imagine that's a tough thing to do, a tough task to go up against. The first half of the year is going to be dominated by Street Fighter. I feel like the second half of the year is going to be dominated by Mortal Kombat. Where does Tekken fit in with all that? Maybe it would be best for them to just say like, hey, we're going to be out spring 2024. But Mortal Kombat looks great. They've jumped to a new game engine, and it definitely shows. I saw people saying online that it looks exactly the same as the last one. It definitely does not. There's a marked improvement over the look of this game to the last game, from the facial animations to the quality of the fatalities. It looks super smooth. I think the cameo mechanic, where it turns it not necessarily into a team-based game, but an assist-based game, kind of like, what was that, the original Marvel, I think was like that, or maybe it was one of the X-Men fighting games. I can't remember. One of those was kind of like this style. The fact that those cameo characters can enter in an existing combo to extend that combo, or help you when you're being on the other side of a bad combo and break it. The fact that they have cameo finishers and they're really going all in on this different playstyle. I think that it's nice to see that Mortal Kombat isn't just playing it safe. They are continuing to advance what they're doing with their gameplay. And, they've already had a really good narrative mode the past few games, that last trilogy, 9, 10, and 11. I'm curious to see where they go forward with it from here. And last up on the list, Alan Wake 2. I've tried to break out of my shell a little bit with horror games. I still don't know if I'm going to play this. This might be a little bit too much for me. Survival horror is definitely not something I'm super interested in. So this may end up being a game that I just kind of watch someone else play to experience the story. But, we'll see. Maybe I end up picking it up as we get further, or we get closer to the game coming out in October, and maybe see a little bit more footage. But October is tough because I think it's coming out just a few days before Spider-Man does, and Spider-Man comes out just a few days before City Skylines does, and it's just everything's all blending together. But I think what they showed from Alan Wake 2 looked fantastic. People that got their hands on it at Summer Game Fest said that it plays better than the first one. It's not as clunky as the first one was. There's two different playable characters, so you're going to get kind of two sides of the story. It sounds like there's some really neat concepts going on from the detective aspect of it, because one of the characters you play as is an FBI agent. They said that they are very heavily influenced by True Detective. I was late to the party on True Detective. I finally watched the first season of it earlier this year, and I loved it. I definitely not surprised that the influence from that is bleeding into video games. And I'm curious to see where they go with it. It seems like there's like kind of this mystical cult, kind of at the middle of everything. And I want to see, what happens with that. But like I said, I don't know if I'll play it, but, at least watch it, experience the story through that way. Maybe it'd be a good stream to put on to watch. But yeah, other than that, there really wasn't any other news this week. Everything kind of was focused entirely on all these game showcases, and there are some still more things to come. We have not seen anything from EA. I don't know if they have enough on the docket to have their own presentation. We haven't seen anything from Nintendo yet. I'm sure we'll have a direct at some point. Gamescom is coming up in a little bit. There are a few studios that announced trailers or had trailers that said like, hey, later on the summer, we'll have more to show. As a lot of these games get ready to come out, we'll get more. We're going to see more of Spider-Man 2 before it comes out. We're going to see more of Starfield before it comes out. All these games are going to get, updates on YouTube and Twitter stories and all that stuff. It's not like this is it until these games come out. We're going to see plenty more. But I was very excited. Overall, out of the 4 presentations, I think Xbox probably took it. I think out of all the games showed at each presentation, Xbox had the most that I was interested in. Not all of those obviously were Xbox exclusives, but some of the exclusives that they showed, I was interested in. I didn't bring them up on my list just because we don't really know enough about them. Like that Fable trailer, it was kind of cool, but we didn't see gameplay, but we don't really know what that game is. So it's hard. You can only be so excited about a game that you really know nothing about. I would like to have seen more like firm release dates. That would have been good. A lot of what they showed is for next year. So I worry that next year's summer presentation is going to be a repeat of this year's in many ways, with just actual release dates and gameplay of stuff that they showed off this year. It is what it is, but they're putting in the work, and they're getting ready to release some pretty cool games. And Starfield obviously is their crown jewel. It's what they're putting all their time and money and effort into. I talked about it before, so I don't want to repeat myself too much, but, last year was very much a year of games that I just wasn't super into. There were obviously some great games last year. One of my favorite games I played in a long time, Immortality, came out last year, so I can't say that 2022 was that much of a disappointment, but, I wasn't into Elden Ring. I'm not into God of War, so a lot of the big titles of last year were things that just didn't appeal to me. And this year, so far, with the exception of Zelda, pretty much all of the big games are appealing to me. If everything kind of plays out the way I hope it does, I would say that 2023 might be one of my favorite years ever for video games, because there are so many things this year already that have come out that I'm super excited about and absolutely loved, and so many things yet to come out in the next few months that I am very, very excited for, and I hope are excellent titles. So yeah, a little bit shorter show this week, I think, judging off the time, but we covered a lot of the stuff live and, reacting to things as it was happening. I imagine next week maybe we'll be a little bit back to normal. But yeah, thanks for hanging out. And of course, thanks for hanging out on the channel. Obviously, to most people looking at these things, a video like this that gets 20 views, 30 views, that's not a lot, but to me it is. And I love the fact that I've been able to go from only getting 2 views a video to 20 to 30. That's awesome. Like that really is, that really is pretty cool to me. It's not much to most people, but it's a lot to me, and I very much am appreciative of it. Streaming has been going pretty well. Took a little bit of time off, but we did the Final Fantasy stream, and then I did the Star Trek stream. So this coming week, I don't know, we'll stream again, obviously, but I'm not sure what I'm going to stream. I just don't know. But we'll definitely have at least one instance of playing more Star Trek. I am very much on the fence with that game. I don't want to stop playing it, but at the same time, it has not been great. The last episode it got better towards the end, but there were probably the first half hour of that stream, I was kind of in my own head saying, why the hell am I still playing this game? If I wasn't streaming this game, I definitely wouldn't be playing it. So I want to say that I'm committed to finishing it, but we will wait and see. Other than that, I don't know, maybe we'll pop on some more Street Fighter, maybe pop on Diablo and play some of that. Also, I didn't get a chance to play it, but there was a new release that came out this week. Park Beyond, which is like a theme park game, kind of like Roller Coaster Tycoon. I wanted to try and play it. To be honest, this weekend I have had a severe headache since Thursday, and it is now Sunday as I am filming this, and it has not gone away. So sitting here in my office, closer than I am to a television, to play a PC game just wasn't really at the top of my priority list, especially after doing the stream with Final Fantasy and Star Trek. I was just a little burned out in the head. So maybe we'll stream some Park Beyond and check that out. And then over the next couple of weeks, we'll have another episode of Full Motion Sickness. We're going to keep it going. Obviously there's been a lot of extra videos on the channel because of all the event coverage. And it's been nice seeing the channel be populated with stuff. So, we'll have some streams and, fit some other stuff in there here and there. But yeah, thanks again for hanging out through the past week with all the extra stuff going on. It's been a fun time in video games, and man, we have a lot to look forward to. So before we head out, Christian, any last words for this week before we let these people go?
I would say it was nice seeing you play with your little friend last week, but my hate for you is such that I can't stand your happiness. Do you think we can now finally get back to normal this week with us screaming until 2 a.m. after I ruin your meatloaf by putting my cigarette out in it?
Yeah, I am super looking forward to that. Take care, everybody. We'll see you next week.